neighbors come onto the scene now, and they look at this person that they recognize as maybe somebody that they used to know. Isn't this the guy that used to lay on the side of the road and beg? Isn't this him? And they were like, no, well, I mean, it looks a lot like him. I'll grant you that. But it's not him because, after all, the guy that we knew was blind, and this guy isn't blind, so it really can't be him. I mean, I don't know who he is. He does look familiar. And finally, someone has the idea to ask him. I guess reality is first century people are a lot like people today. They much prefer to talk about someone. They much prefer to do that rather than to talk to someone or with someone. And remember, all through this story, the man was born blind. There's no indication that he had any problem hearing. So as everyone chooses to talk about him, he's hearing them. He's hearing them debate who he is and what's happened to him. They finally get around to asking, are you the guy? Well, yes. It's me. Well, then how are your eyes open? And he tells them the story. He said, this guy named Jesus comes along, and he makes mud. We're not going to get into where he got the water, but he makes mud, and then he tells me to go wash in the pool. I go and wash in the pool, and when I come back, I can see. Well, where is he? The man basically says, I don't know. Remember, last time I was with him, I was blind. I don't know where he's at. And so they take this guy to the Pharisees. They take him to the religious leaders now. They want the religious leaders to look into this, to see what needs to be done about this, because he can see again. And so the man goes to the Pharisees, and he tells them his story. And they hear it. But the problem is they only see what's wrong with his story. They immediately start saying, you were healed today? But how can you be healed on the Sabbath? All they see is that there's a problem with the timing. All they see is it wasn't done the way we want it done or the way we like it done. And so finally someone looks at him and says, well, what do you think of this Jesus? And he answers, but they don't see his point because he doesn't say something they want to hear. And so the Pharisees, they get mad, and they decide we're going to get to the bottom of this. We're going to bring in his parents. See, I love this story because now they brought in this poor guy's parents to ask them, what do you know about this? Is this your son? Yes. Was he blind? Yes. From birth, he was blind. He hasn't been faking it all these years. Well, how can he see now? We don't know. When he left the house this morning, he was blind. What he's gotten himself into today that has made him be able to see, we can't really tell you about that. If you want to know, he's a grown man, ask him yourself. Back to the man. They don't ask him any more open-ended questions because they don't want him to talk about something they don't want to hear about. And so instead, they ask, what did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? By this point, the man can see this isn't going anywhere. And so he tells them, I've already told you what he's done. Why do you keep asking me these questions? Do you want to become his disciples too? I like that the guy has attitude. I mean, he's only been able to see a short amount of time, but he's living into it big time. And the Pharisees become irate. And they throw him out of the temple. Now, for us, we think about that and we just think that he was evicted. You know, they bring in some kind of temple bouncer, take him to the door and throw him out. No. To be thrown out of the temple means you can't go to worship at the temple anymore. You don't go make sacrifices anymore. You don't go, and in the Jewish faith, you don't go and become clean in the eyes of God anymore. And here's the sad thing about it. When he was blind, when he had that disability, that challenge, that had prevented him from ever being able to go to the temple and to be clean in the eyes of God and to make his sacrifice. He finally has his eyes open. He's finally deemed worthy to go to the temple, and now they've thrown him out. And so he starts back to where he came from, probably back to trying to get back home to where his parents live. And he encounters Jesus again. Imagine this guy. For the first time in his life, he is seeing the world around him. The first time in his life, he's seeing what nature and all of God's creation looks like. He's seeing the world. And he comes to Jesus, and he sees the light of the world. The one who could bring clarity out of mud. He sees Jesus. And Jesus seems to sum up all of this that's taken place, and even something they might have missed. He tells the man, "For judgment I came into this world, so that the blind will see, and those who see will become blind." You see, the Pharisees, they thought they could see everything very clearly. But they were just as blind in their own way as the man at the start of the story. While this story is about that physical healing, the physical healing of blindness, it's also a story about spiritual blindness. Spiritual blindness, which was a disease that afflicted many of the Pharisees, a disease that still afflicts many of us even today. Helen Keller, who of course was blind from when she was 19 months on, she said one time, "The worst thing that can ever befall a person is not to lose your sight, but it is to lose your vision." To lose your vision. To lose your sight means you don't see what's happening around you right now. To lose your vision means that you can't see what could be. You can't see beyond this moment. You can't see what might be done and what might come. You can't see that. That was the Pharisees. And that's sometimes us. We can be blinded where we can't see, where we lose our vision. We could be blinded by a person's background or a person's history like the disciples were at the start of the story. You know, the start of the story, all they're worried about is who sinned this man or his parents that he had been born this way. They're so focused on the past, on the background, that they can't see what's possible right now and what's possible in the years to come. They can't see a different future for this man. The psychiatrist Scott Peck says that we are all inherently resistant to change. He says a lot of people go to see him and they talk about the fact that they want to change. They really want to change. Absolutely want to change. He said, but from the moment therapy begins, they start fighting change tooth and nail. They can't let go of the past for themselves, the past for others. They can't let go of the past in order to get a vision of what the future could be. How many of us write someone off because of where they came from or because of who their family is or because of mistakes they made or whatever that reason might be? How many of us write someone off for something like that? Remember, there were people that wrote off Jesus for something like that. They said, how could anything good come out of Nazareth? Well, the Savior of the world came out of Nazareth, but they missed it because they weren't looking at what could be. They were too focused on what had been. Because, see, we could also be blinded by judgmentalism and nitpicking and criticizing, like the Pharisees in the story. That can blind us too. Blind us to what God is doing, blind us to what God could do. I mean, the Pharisees, they have a problem with this healing. I mean, never mind, someone who's never seen before is finally able to see. They can't see that because that doesn't matter. What matters is Jesus did this on the wrong day of the week. He didn't do it according to the way that they wanted it done or it approved it being done. He had done this amazing thing on the Sabbath, so that's all they could see. We've probably all known people like that. Only see the bad in the midst of the good. Always be looking for that gray cloud that would surround a silver lining. They're always looking for that. We probably don't want to admit it if that's us, if we're that person. We probably all have known those people that are blinded by judgmentalism and nitpicking and critiquing and commenting. The Pharisees see something wrong with everything. And we probably know folks like that too. Folks that pick at all of life's joys, that always seems to tarnish life's triumph, or they always make critical comments about every victory, every good thing that happens. The Pharisees couldn't rejoice because they were too busy pointing out what was wrong. Someone once said that we often can find our judgmental moments, our critical moments, those moments when we're nitpicking, and we can often find that in the second half of statements we make, usually following the word but. Things like, what a beautiful wedding. But isn't it a shame the bride didn't lose about 10 pounds for the day? Or, congratulations on your new promotion, but I sure hope you work with your boss better than I did. Or, isn't that baby cute? But isn't it a shame she looks like her daddy? I mean, this is unfortunately the way too often we talk. And have you ever noticed that when you're doing that, if you are, not saying you are, but if you're doing that, have you ever noticed the change in the other person's face, the person you're talking with? You watch them go from joy, wasn't that a beautiful wedding? And then you watch the joy just sort of drain from their face in that moment as now you're going to pick it apart. And have you ever noticed that there are those people in life that when they say something positive to you, when they celebrate something great with you, you truly are just sitting there waiting for the but? Because it seems to always come. You're just waiting on them to they seem to really like this, but I wonder what was wrong with it. Because it seems to always come. What if we changed that? And what if we stopped? What if we started just saying the first part of these sentences, these first things, and not feeling this obligation to point out the criticism and the critique? It's a miracle that a man was healed of blindness. But isn't it awful that Jesus did it on a Sabbath? We can be blind to, or we can overlook things because we're picking it to death. We can overlook the amazing thing that God is doing in our midst because we're too busy trying to figure out what's wrong with it or how we can push back on it. I mean, if we aren't careful, we will try to fit the acts of God, the amazing things that God can do, into our way of doing things, into what we know and what we expect. If we aren't careful, we're blind, unable to comprehend what God is doing in our life, in our church, in our world. But this story is about healing blindness. This story is about Jesus making someone see who'd never seen before. And maybe that's us. Or maybe we just don't see as well as we once did, and we need some help. Jesus can help us see. To see what God is doing, to see what can be, to see what could be, to see what should be. Jesus can help us see our friends and our family in new and better ways. And Jesus can help us see opportunities for how we could change and improve our walk with Him and how we could live our life as a disciple better today than we did yesterday. And Jesus can help us see the positive, the good of what God is doing, and not pick it apart. Jesus can help us see. But the question is, do we want to see? Do we want to change? Do we want to be better? Do we want to grow more into the likeness of the one who made us and saved us? Do we want to see? Or have we unfortunately grown too comfortable in our blindness? I hope we want to see. Let us pray.